Welcome into Bama Central 3 and Out with Joey Blackwell and Mason Smith. I'm Katie Wyndham. And guys, it started to finally feel a little bit like fall outside, more football weather, but that also means that basketball is right around the corner. The Alabama basketball team had their first official practice of the fall on Monday, and we were able to speak to Nate Oats and Darius Miles and Charles Bediako. And it was kind of interesting talking to him because of all that they did this summer, that this didn't feel like a practice one. And Joey, you already kind of wrote about that, but just kind of maybe what were some of your biggest takeaways from meeting with Nate Oats and some of the players as Alabama basketball heads into another season with some high expectations?
Well, I think the biggest takeaways are what you just mentioned. How Alabama, this doesn't feel like a first practice to them because of all that they did over the summer. And I think what's going to be crucial to them, at least in these few weeks before this season, is going to be building upon maybe some of the shortcomings or the things that they did really well overseas. Oates Monday talked about how that he thinks that they can get wins now, even when they're not shooting the ball, which is huge for them. Last year when they were hot, they were red hot. They could beat pretty much anybody in the country, it seemed like. But when they were cold, they could lose to Missouri on the road. They could lose to Georgia. These losses that really didn't do them any favors when it came to NCAA seeding time for the tournament. So if they're able to improve on that, and that starts with offensive rebounding and improving the defense as well, which he says they're better in both of those categories. I think if what he says is true and they're a much better team at winning, even when they're not shooting well, I think that's a really solid start to preseason preparation.
Definitely, Joey. Matter of fact, it's a great segue into what Charles Bediako mentioned during his press conference. He mentioned how there are so many more athletes on this particular team that's going to, force him to just be better overall in his fundamentals, boxing out, attacking the glass more aggressively, and regarding three-point shooting. I got a chance to ask Darius Miles about what he's been working on. He's been working on transition and the famous Ray Allen backpedal into the corner, which I think is going to really help spread the floor for the Alabama offense, especially with all their shooting, kind of graduating or heading to the NBA from the previous team. So I'm looking forward to see how those two guys, along with the rest of the elder statesmen of Alabama's basketball team, kind of step up this season.
I think for me, which we've heard a little bit of this throughout the off season, obviously, Joey, me and you were in San Diego for that last game of last season when Javon Quinterly went out early with ACL injury. And I think his development this season is going to be really key for this team. Alabama fans, it's going to be a lot of new faces on this basketball team, whether transfers or freshmen. And so there's only, two scholarship guys that are healthy that are practicing right now that are returning. Then you also have Amari Burnett, who's never played for Alabama before, and then JQ. And so I think he's obviously been at Alabama for a long time now because he had the unfortunate situation of transferring before, the NCAA had the waiver where just anyone could play immediately. And so he's been under Nate Oats for a long time and has been able to watch from different angles. And obviously he has a lot of talent. He was MVP of the SEC tournament 2 years ago. And so I think his health and ability to return is going to be huge for this team. And Nate Oats said that it could be before SEC play. And so I think he's going to be kind of a key player for me to watch this season. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think one more thing that, should be brought up is accountability, which Nate Oats reiterated a couple of times, and that how he and his staff can hold players much more accountable this year because of how much deeper they are on the roster. Oats talked about how he has 11 guys, 12 if you count JQ, who, can all see significant minutes. And when you have a roster that's that deep, that allows you to hold players more accountable and restrict their minutes because hey, you're not doing so hot or you're doing something wrong, I can put somebody else in there for you if you're not going to put in the work. Whereas last year, their roster not being as deep, they really were forced to give guys minutes that probably should have been sitting on the bench for a few games. So I just think that personal accountability, now that Oats has the opportunity to do that with a deeper roster, I think that's also going to be really huge moving forward this year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think his exact words on Monday were, if you're not going to guard, you're not going to play. So he tried to threaten players that last year if they didn't play defense that they were going to be benched. But like you said, he didn't have a lot of options to turn to on the bench. So he had to play guys that maybe weren't giving max effort. But this year, he has that option to, like you said, hold them accountable. But Bama Central will be covering basketball all this season, of course, in the middle of football right now. But I'm going ahead and getting things started with some other sports. But that'll about do it for today's 3 and Out. Thank you so much for watching.